Take a look at this. What you're seeing right now is the brain of a completely healthy, normal human being. And now look at this one. This is the brain of someone who is addicted to pornography. You are probably asking yourself right now, what is that glowing yellow area and why does it look so intense and active compared to the first brain? Well, scientists spent years, literally many years, conducting research and studies, and what they discovered was absolutely eye-opening. The impact that hard drugs have on the brain of someone addicted to those substances is virtually identical to the impact that pornography has on the brain of a porn addict. Let that sink in for a moment. There is essentially no meaningful difference between the brain of a drug addict and the brain of someone hooked on pornography. And here is something even more surprising. It is not just drugs and pornography that do this. Any form of addiction, regardless of what it is, produces this same kind of effect on the human brain. Yes, that includes being addicted to social media as well. By the time you finish watching this video, you are going to think twice, maybe even 10 times, before you ever decide to watch pornography again. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how you constantly find yourself opening social media apps over and over throughout the day, almost without even thinking about it, yet you never find yourself doing the same thing with a textbook or a novel? You never randomly pick up a book 10 times in a row out of habit, do you? Well, there's actually a very straightforward explanation for this, and somewhere in the back of your mind, you probably already have a sense of why this happens. The reason is simple. When you scroll through social media and look at posts and videos and updates, you experience a feeling of pleasure, a good feeling, a rush of enjoyment that keeps pulling you back. And that feeling does not happen by accident. It happens because of a specific chemical reaction taking place inside your brain. A chemical is being released, and that chemical has a name. It is called dopamine. Every single time this hormone gets released inside your brain, you feel that wave of pleasure and satisfaction. And because your brain enjoyed that feeling, it wants to experience it again. So it encourages you, pushes you, urges you to go back and do the same thing that caused that release in the first place. You open a social media app, dopamine gets released. You scroll down and see something interesting, dopamine gets released again. You keep scrolling, it keeps releasing. And before you even realize what has happened, hours have gone by and you have completely lost track of time. That is how powerful this chemical is. Now, for anyone who is not familiar with what dopamine actually does, let me break it down for you. Dopamine is often referred to as the desire hormone. What that means is that whenever you do something and dopamine gets released as a result, your brain becomes motivated to repeat that action. It wants to go back and do that thing again so it can trigger another release of dopamine. And the stronger the pleasure you feel from doing something, the stronger that drive becomes to do it again and again. Your brain essentially builds a craving around the activity that gives it dopamine. Alright, so now the real question. Why exactly is watching pornography harmful? What does it actually do to your brain? Here's how it works. When you eat food you enjoy, when you watch a movie you love, when you engage in any activity that brings you happiness or satisfaction, your brain releases dopamine. And that is completely normal. That is a healthy and natural function of the brain. However, here is where pornography is fundamentally different from everything else. When someone watches pornography, the amount of dopamine released in the brain is approximately 5 times greater than what gets released during normal pleasurable activities. 5 times. That level of stimulation is not something the human brain was designed to handle on a regular basis. And when it is repeatedly exposed to that kind of extreme dopamine surge, it begins to break down the reward system inside the brain. What this means in practical terms is devastating. Once your brain gets used to receiving 5 times the normal amount of dopamine, it starts to lose its ability to feel satisfied by anything less. Normal levels of dopamine, the kind that come from everyday life, from spending time with people you care about, from achieving something, from enjoying a meal or watching a film, begin to feel flat and boring. Your brain has been rewired to expect something far more intense, and when it does not get that intensity, it simply does not respond the same way anymore. This is exactly why when someone first discovers pornography, it feels incredible and exciting, and to chase that feeling they come back for more, and then it becomes a routine, and then a habit, and eventually a regular part of their life. But here is the cycle that traps people. After a while, the same content that used to feel intensely satisfying starts to feel ordinary. The brain has adapted to it. So now the person needs something more extreme, something more stimulating to get the same rush they used to get from something milder. They find themselves spending more time searching for videos, looking for something that hits harder than before, something that finally satisfies them again. This is almost perfectly parallel to how cigarette addiction works. Someone starts with 1 or 2 cigarettes a day, then it becomes 3 or 4, then 5 or 6. The pattern just keeps escalating because the brain keeps demanding more to feel the same effect. Pornography addiction follows the exact same path. And it gets even more serious than that. After extensive research spanning a decade, scientists discovered that prolonged drug addiction causes the frontal lobes of the brain to physically shrink. The frontal lobes are the most advanced and important region of the human brain. They are responsible for logical thinking, decision-making, planning, impulse control, and problem-solving. When this region begins to deteriorate, the consequences for a person's life are enormous. Now, what more recent studies have revealed is that it is not just drug addiction that causes this shrinkage. Mobile phone addiction and pornography addiction can also lead to the same deterioration of the frontal lobes. The very part of your brain that makes you capable of thinking clearly, making smart choices, and staying in control of your behavior is being physically harmed. A lot of you watching this right now may already be somewhere on the spectrum of porn addiction, even if you have never labeled it that way. You might find that you genuinely enjoy watching pornography, while at the same time, everyday life has started to feel dull and uninteresting. Things that used to bring you joy no longer seem to do anything for you. That is because your brain has become calibrated to an extreme level of stimulation. Normal dopamine feels like nothing compared to what it has got used to. And as a result, ordinary activities, whether that is studying, working, socializing, or even hobbies, feel completely draining and pointless. This is not a coincidence. This is your reward system breaking down in real time. Concentration levels are dropping. People find it harder and harder to sit and focus on studying or any mentally demanding task. And this is directly connected to the escalating levels of addiction people are experiencing. As the addiction grows stronger, the brain demands more and more stimulation just to feel normal. Other activities that used to feel meaningful stop giving any sense of reward. Laziness sets in deeply. The motivation to do almost anything begins to disappear. And on top of all that, as the reward system deteriorates further, the brain becomes increasingly emotionally sensitive. Small problems start to feel overwhelming. Stress responses become exaggerated. And perhaps one of the most painful effects of all, self-esteem and self-confidence take a serious hit. People start to feel worse about themselves without always understanding why. So with all of that said, the natural next question is there actually something that can be done about this? Is there a real practical solution that works? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. But before we talk about how to break free from pornography addiction, let us first address something important. What about the people who are already addicted? What about those whose brains have already been affected to some degree? Is the damage reversible? Here is the good news. The dopamine receptors in the brain that have been depleted or worn down through addiction can actually be restored through a process called dopamine detox. You may have also heard this referred to as dopamine fasting. So what exactly is dopamine detox? The concept is straightforward. You set aside at least one full day per week during which you do not allow dopamine to be triggered in your brain at all. For that entire day, you cut yourself off from everything that normally causes a dopamine release. That means no mobile phone, no pornography, no masturbation, no social media, no video games, none of your favorite comfort foods. Essentially, anything that typically gives you that rush of pleasure needs to be completely off the table for the day. To make this work, the recommendation is to actually leave your home for the day. Go somewhere else. And under no circumstances should you have your phone with you. Remove every possible source of stimulation. What you can do during this time is meditate, exercise, read a physical book, or engage in writing. These activities are encouraged not because they produce extreme dopamine highs, but because they engage your mind in a quiet and grounded way. The key principle here is to let your brain become bored. And when that boredom hits, when you feel restless and uncomfortable and like you desperately want to reach for your phone or do something to get that dopamine hit, that is actually the signal that what you're doing is working. That discomfort is progress. The whole point is to train your brain to function without being flooded with artificial stimulation. And as you get used to tolerating that boredom, something remarkable begins to happen. Everyday things start to feel enjoyable again. The ordinary world begins to feel interesting once more. Your ability to find pleasure in simple, real-life experiences starts to come back. Your concentration improves. The constant laziness and lack of motivation starts to lift. Now, once you have addressed the brain recovery side of things, the next step is making sure you actually stay away from pornography and build a life where you are no longer pulled toward it. There are two key principles that will help you do this. The first one is to find a replacement activity. This is a universal strategy for breaking any habit, and it applies just as powerfully here. The way it works is that instead of simply trying to stop watching porn through willpower alone, you identify the specific times when you typically find yourself turning to it. And for those exact time slots, you deliberately build a new habit. And this new habit needs to be something you actually enjoy. It could be watching educational content online. It could be putting on a funny or inspiring movie. It could be any activity that genuinely interests you and holds your attention. The critical part is that when you do this replacement activity, you have to fully engage with it and actually enjoy it. If you sit there feeling miserable and forcing yourself through something you hate just to avoid porn, your brain is going to notice that it is getting no real reward, and it is going to pull you straight back toward pornography to get its fix. The replacement must be genuinely enjoyable. That is what makes it effective. The second principle is self-awareness and honest acknowledgement. You have to bring yourself to a place where you truly understand and accept that pornography is damaging you. Your mind, your future, your relationships, your ability to experience real life fully. Many people struggle to quit because somewhere in the back of their mind, they are not fully convinced that it is really that harmful. They have a voice in their head saying that this is all being exaggerated or that it does not apply to them. As long as that doubt is there, the motivation to actually change will not be strong enough. You have to get to a point of genuine conviction that what pornography is doing to your brain and your life is real, serious, and worth fighting against. So to bring everything together, here is your roadmap. Number 1, replace the habit with something genuinely enjoyable that you can turn to during the moments when temptation typically strikes. Number 2, build a deep and real belief within yourself that pornography is genuinely harmful to you and to your future. And alongside these 2 steps, commit to doing a full dopamine detox at least 1 day every week. Step back, disconnect, let your brain rest, and reset. Think seriously about the kind of future you want for yourself. Ask yourself honestly what you are after. Is it a brief rush of artificial pleasure that leaves you emptier than before? Or is it the lasting satisfaction that comes from working towards something meaningful, achieving real goals, and building a life that you're genuinely proud of? Because that kind of fulfillment, the kind that comes from real accomplishment and real connection, is something that pornography will never be able to give you. Not even close.